There are some brilliant interior and architectural designers in Sydney and in the space that we play in. What I find in my experience or our experience is those that are really the cut above the rest are those that can design beautiful work, but to the budget that the project has. And it's when you work within those constraints and those parameters is where I think the magic happens. Often people in that space, you can design beautiful product when you don't pay any respect to budget.
Yes.
But when you put a budget around something, that's where I think the magic happens. If you can still deliver brilliant outcomes for a price, that's where we see value add. And that's why often we've done so many projects with the same design team because they understand our constraints.
Welcome to Behind the Design, a podcast where we unfold the details behind the designs we know and love and explore how each project comes to life. I am Camilla Ingle, owner of Unfolded, an interior design and styling studio. In this podcast series, we dive into the details with our industry experts, covering topics such as the creative process, latest design trends, and how we, as an industry, work together to meet the brief and overcome challenges. Let the conversation begin. Welcome to Behind the Design, Dom. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you, Camilla. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. What a beautiful space you've got.
It's pretty cool, isn't it? It's Laporte.
Spectacular.
Do you love it?
I do.
And I guess, from a development perspective, you probably see lots of spaces all the time. This is what you live and breathe.
We do. And I take my hat off. It's a testament to whoever has delivered this kind of outcome. I mean, we've looked at a few opportunities like this sort of adaptive reuse in commercial and warehouse industrial space, and I think they've executed it beautifully. How did you find this space?
Well, it was actually on Instagram. I think a lady named Hayley started this.
Okay.
And it's been, I think she's had this running for around 8 years.
Wow.
So she was one of the OGs, which I think we spoke about briefly earlier. But it's a classic case of, finding that niche, having the capital to produce something like this, and the fact that it's just so versatile as well. So
and clearly appealing to, the market insofar as every retail space or office space I've seen here looks to be fully occupied. So
yes,
they're obviously doing something right. There's obviously demand for this type of product. So it's brilliant. Well done.
Exactly. And so tell me, Podia Development. So how did it all happen for you? Where did it all start?
Okay, so I'll take you on a bit of a journey personally, post-school, and then I'll get to where we are today at Podia. So I finished school, I grew up in the Lower North Shore. My father was an architect and builder and had a small design and building practice. So I guess you could say it was always ingrained in me that design, building, construction, property, real estate was in the blood, albeit I think I quickly realised that I didn't have sort of the numerical acumen to head down the path of architectural design. And so I guess I was a big fan of skiing and playing golf. I wanted to design professional golf courses, resorts, and ski resorts. So rightly or wrongly, I headed down the landscape architectural route at New South Wales University, which was brilliant. I did a 4-year degree there where I actually then crossed paths with a lot of architects, interior designers, and sort of really opened my...
What was the degree in, sorry?
Bachelor of Landscape Architecture.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Often people would refer to me as just as, your back of the mill gardener. I'd say landscape architecture is a little more comprehensive and diverse than that in this day and age, but that's what I did, 4 years of that, and that sort of really gave me a foray into the design world. Long story short, I finished that degree and I loved it. I then worked for a small firm doing sort of very much commercial landscape architecture and design work. They also had an urban planning and architectural component of the business. So 4 or 5 years into that business, I quite quickly realised, some might say it took me some time actually, that I had a great appreciation for design and the craft, but I didn't believe I had the skill set to be a good or great designer myself. And often what I found sitting around a boardroom with consultants, there was one person at the end of the table who touched on everyone's expertise, was sort of, a jack of all trades, master of none. And very quickly I realised that was the developer, that was the person making the project, viable and governing delivery and outcomes. And I think that was sort of the tipping point where I realized I need to make a fundamental shift from the design world to the development world. So I guess on the back of that, I did a lot of research, had 1,000 coffees with mentors, other people in the network that I'd sort of tried to forge myself and through others, and basically quickly realised for me to get a foot in the door with either an institutional large-scale developer like a Mirvac, Stocklands, Lendlease, or a smaller private, I really needed to go back to university.
How old were you at this point?
At this stage, I was probably 24, 25.
That's pretty brave to know that you need to have those coffees, meet with the mentors. Were you guided? Is this your dad was guiding you?
It's a good question. And look, it was quite daunting. I mean, I was certainly
I think, me 10 years ago, I'm like,
true. And I was, look, truth be told, I was no exemplary student, I love my time at university. I love my time at school, but I've got two sisters. The older one is a respiratory specialist in the medical space. Great, brilliant mind. My younger sister's in private equity, numerical, people-focused. I'd probably say I'm the black sheep of the family, so I didn't quite have the brain power or the acumen. So that's why I sort of started in the creative space. Quickly realised obviously it wasn't a creative, and then, but obviously behaviourally, I've got a big personality, a lot of energy. I'm a passionate type of individual, and I wasn't afraid to go and sit down with people and
quite confident.
That's it. I think the confidence built over time, but I wanted to sit down with the right people and get that guidance of, okay, if I'm going to make a fundamental career shift in this particular direction, where do I need to start? I already knew I was somewhat behind the eight ball. My peers were in that space, were already 5 years ahead of me. So I made the, maybe bold decision to go back to university at this particular time. That was at University of UTS, and it was a Masters of Property Development Finance degree, because everyone I'd spoken to had said, Dom, you can keep knocking on doors for the next 3 years and you may be lucky to get a job in the development space, but realistically, the financial, legal, town planning, the fundamentals of putting a feasibility together, all of the ingredients that make up, I guess, a good development professional, development manager, you need to go back and do the tertiary study.
So that's really interesting, because I think a lot of people these days talk about, I know I look back at my uni degree and there's so much I learned, but there's so much more I've learned on the job. So it's interesting that these people that you were chatting with, mentors and experienced people in the industry, were saying, you do have to go back on some level and study a certain amount to get to. So would it not be that you could have just kind of been taken under the wing of somebody and learned on the job?
It's a great question. And look, that's something I really contemplated, obviously, because I always try and do things as efficiently as I can and give
avoid a HECS debt.
Spot on, right? I mean, it was a big financial commitment to go back to university and do the masters, albeit everyone I'd spoken to. And look, I made the decision at the time, you're right, you could pursue a career in the private development space where you're probably right, you didn't need the piece of paper. Fair. All of the sort of people, thought leaders that I sat down with, who had reputable and progressive careers in the institutional development space at the likes of ASX-listed larger groups said, you've got that nexus of choosing private or institutional. You can always learn how to make shortcuts down the track, but, at someone at your nexus of your career, learning the right way to do things with integrity and value is an institutional type operator where you learn systems, processes, governance, QA.
It sounds like documentation.
Spot on. All of the diligent things that make what we think the ingredients of a good development manager, you invariably will be, the amount of time and effort these big organisations invest in their junior staff is incremental in helping them develop and grow. So for me personally, I figured, right, if I want a foot in the door with one of those big groups, I need to go back and do the tertiary study and get that piece of paper. So granted, at 25, I didn't really want to be going back to university, but it's something that I had to forge on with. I moved from where I was back to home, obviously had a financial burden of paying for the degree. It was either a 3-year part-time master's or it was a 1.5-year full-time. So I was working full-time at the landscape architectural firm. They were very accommodating in giving me the time, but it was basically I worked Monday to Thursday. I finished work at 5. I had to be at university from 6 till 10 on the Thursday night, Friday morning 8 till 6, Saturday 8 till 6 for a year and a half. But I'm probably, and look, it sounds daunting now, but I'm the type of personality, if I can't run at something at a million miles an hour, I'll probably discard it and put it away and not finish. So the advice from people at the time was get it done as fast and as quick as you can.
Right.
And that's, I guess, what I did. And look, invariably, thankfully, it was actually, unlike my undergrad, obviously I was paying for this and it was a huge financial commitment for me, but I was fully committed. So I worked around the clock to get good results because I knew that was sort of the stepping stone to hopefully get a foot in the door with one of these larger organisations. And so, yeah, fast forward the 1.5 year degree, I interviewed with all the big groups, Mirvac, Australands, Frasers, Stocklands and whatnot, because I wanted big institutional experience, and thankfully Mirvac gave me the job. And I absolutely loved working there, the environment. I soaked it up. I lived and breathed Mirvac for 5.5 years.
That's a good stint.
Which I felt was a reasonable stint. I mean, there are often people who will last 1 or 2 years and realise pretty quickly that's not the environment for them. Obviously, there's a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of internal politics, but, it's an incredible training ground. I was very fortunate to have a wonderful mentor who really guided me through and navigated that political arena, but equally was technically very comprehensive in his leadership and training of me and developing me into, I guess, the sort of development manager that I was. And I was fortunate to work on some really wonderful projects, some of which are at Green Square, Harold Park, Bondi, but primarily in the residential space. I didn't at Mirvac, you're quite siloed. You're either in the residential team, industrial, commercial, or retail. So I very much took an interest in residential, and that's sort of where I forged my career. And then, sort of 5.5 years on, I delivered a handful of projects from sort of inception to completion, which gave me the full spectrum of delivery experience, which I think is invaluable for any sort of young development professional. But then I guess with my sort of entrepreneurial confidence and eagerness to progress really quickly, albeit there was a great career, I think, ahead of me at Mirvac, personally, my entrepreneurial spirit was somewhat being quarantined there. And the bureaucracy, governance, the red tape, for lack of a better word, is sometimes a bit suffocating. There's just committee.
But is it necessary
Correct.
for them to, yeah.
But I guess in these organisations, they've got, investors and shareholders to report to. There's a lot of governance, there's risk, there's audit. You don't have that generally, or to a lesser degree, in the private space. And after a while, the administrative tasks of reporting up the line and managing stakeholders actually detracted from delivering really good project outcomes and driving projects.
And how did all of that feel when you were wanting a creative, I don't know, I hear all of this and I'm thinking, it reminds me of when I've got an admin day versus when I've got a day of mood boarding and concept design.
Look, it's quite similar. I mean, ultimately, as a development manager, your role is to sort of keep the project on time, on budget, and moving forward. Hence why there are so many resources in those large organisations, because there is such layers upon layers of reporting. It's imperative to do quality work and reporting and QA and governance, but sometimes it's just overboard. I'd spend 2 or 3 days in a month writing PCG reports and writing investor reports and updating other stakeholders when I should be focused on delivering the project, driving efficiencies and outcomes, driving revenue, thinking how we can innovate and deliver the project within the parameters that we've set ourselves, not reporting on those parameters to others day in, day out. That sort of just became suffocating for me.
Yeah, so much communication.
So much of that.
And you have to be so on to be able to communicate it, because if you get asked a question, it's a bit of a spanner.
Spot on.
You're like, oh, hang on.
Spot on.
I have to go back and research.
And so exactly that. And so that sort of, for me personally, almost just sucked the cool out of the air.
Yeah.
And I quite quickly realised, thank you, this has been an incredible platform for me to grow my career. Yes, there's a pathway forward, but I think I need fundamentally to shift towards the private space. And ultimately, I had been introduced to Michael Grassi, who at the time...
Didn't he have a furniture company?
He did.
He did. Nomi? Nomi.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So that's how I was introduced to then Podia. So I was at the nexus of leaving, obviously, Mirvac. I'd spoken with a handful of other sort of smaller privates who did great work. I obviously knew I'm very design-led and wanted to work with a group that shared that same passion and vision and value. I didn't want to be doing 400 units in Wetherill Park. That was not my bag. That doesn't get me out of bed every morning. I wanted to be,
cutter.
that's it. I didn't. Exactly.
Some people love it though.
Exactly right. And look, there is definitely a sector for that type of product and a market for that. But my passion lay in doing really beautiful work with fabulous designers, and I just felt that the creative entrepreneurship that a small private would give me, autonomy to make decisions quickly, pivot, was the space I wanted to pursue. So I was introduced to Michael Grassi, who at the time had just previously finished probably 10 years working as the 2IC to Lang Walker, who's arguably Australia's most reputable and recognised, accomplished developer across all sectors, commercial, retail, residential. Michael had started the business Podia with his two other co-founders, Stephen Dwight and Cameron Thompson, back in 2012, 2013. All of them had worked together at Walker Corporation. And the business basically stemmed, over a 15-year period, each of them stemmed out of basically a desire to go out and do their own thing, having, again, learned under the leadership of Lang, and the incredible legacy of projects and leadership that he fostered at Walker Corp, but they ultimately want to go out and start their own business. So
it was entrepreneurial.
And that's sort of how the business grew. There were only 4 people in the business when I joined, the 3 co-founders, administrative and EA and another development manager. And Michael and I met. We had a number of interactions, and then finally he's an extremely compelling salesperson, and Michael generally gets what he wants, and he basically convinced me that this was, he wanted me to be part of his business, the growth of the business. I wanted to also put my fingerprint on how we would grow and develop our projects. I wanted to have influence over the people that we hired, and Mike basically gave me all of that opportunity to help shape his business. It's not my business, but help me shape his business and grow it. And I've been there.
Be the team behind it.
That's it. And the business, there was obviously 3 founders. Stephen Dwight's no longer with the business. Michael and Cameron bought him out about 2 years ago post-COVID. Steve's gone off and retired and is doing other things, which is wonderful. But Michael and Cameron have a very complementary but different skill sets. Mike is very much origination, development, acquisition and front-end design. Cameron's very much project management, construction delivery, and they complement each other's skill sets. But that's sort of somewhat how we've divided the business. There's very much a front-end origination, value capture, value creation side of the business. And then there's, once we've secured a site, designed it, secured a town planning approval, sold or leased, then we hand it over typically to our delivery team, and they will carry the project forward through to completion.
Wow.
That's hopefully a 2-second summary of sort of my journey
Hierarchy of
to how we left university, Mirvac, and then with Podia. And look, where we are today, Podia, it's sort of coming up 10, 12 years. It originally started as a development advisory business where, we had been introduced to a handful of, obviously, clients or partners who either had assets, a large property portfolio, but didn't quite have the development expertise to realise, adaptive reuse, highest and best use and whatnot. And the business started in a development advisory capacity, so fee for service. It's quite difficult to start a development business from a standing start without a large chunk of capital, which neither of the 3 founders did. So they basically built the business from the ground up, as you know what it's like. To sort of get development sites up and running, you do need funding. It's sort of the source of every evil. And so without a large capital a base behind you, we had to sort of build that nest egg through development advisory, fee for service for clients. We delivered for them. We built trust, rapport, track record, and then ultimately that stemmed then into Podia's first project, wholly funded by Podia and our capital partner. And then fast forward to where we are today, I think we have probably 8 or 9 projects currently in planning, in construction, and completion. So we're slowly growing organically, but that's a bit about the business and the people who are behind it.
It's interesting how you mentioned the different roles and essentially the different mentality and approach of so it's Mike and who was Cameron. So I was listening to the E-Myth audiobook. Have you listened to it or read it? It's a paperback version, but I just listened to it on Spotify the other day. I was in the car, and it talks about, the myths behind opening your own business and all that type of thing. And one thing that it covered in chapter 2 or 3, I think it was, is the roles of, if someone says, oh, hey, I'm going to start a business. And it's like, yeah, but what kind of person are you? Because they say that there's the manager, the entrepreneur, and the technician. And it sounds like Mike's the entrepreneur and the technician sounds like Cameron. And then, whether there's a third person or not, I'm thinking, okay, I'm in between the manager and the entrepreneur, and I need a technician. When I was hearing back what the technician does, because essentially everyone wants to stay in their lane because they're good at that. And that's good to stay in your lane.
Absolutely.
However, when you're a solo party like myself, I've got a small team, but they're not technicians and they're not managers.
Right.
But, I had a recent conversation with Mia Lake. She was on the podcast.
Wonderful.
She's got a design manager. And I was thinking, what does a design manager do? And now that I've listened to this book, it makes you realize that, you've got to have a few different roles for the business to lift and take off.
Absolutely.
Well, you've got to cover a few roles. So if you're only covering a couple of them and you're falling behind in another, that's probably why, because you might need someone to do that role so that you can focus on being naturally, in Mike's case, the creative and things like that.
And that's sort of in my new role as the general manager of development at Podia is that responsibility to some degree now sits with me in making sure we have the right people in the right seats.
And when you said you wanted to be a part of the
shaping the business
and everything.
Exactly. And so I've probably taken a more active role in welcoming the right candidates into the business for the right roles. I mean, we've often laughed. I mean, we're only a team of 12, but we have obviously the 2 directors who take very different, craft very different lanes for themselves and demarcate their roles and responsibilities quite clearly. So there's a clear line of distinction. My role in general manager somewhat sits across all of development and delivery, and am responsible for the senior development managers and the development managers, ADMs in the business, and basically onboarding those personalities to shape, I guess, the way we work, the Podia way, and looking for the right people to fill those roles spot on. And look, we've got a COO who helps us oversee all of the legal, risk, accounting and financial obligations of running a business. As you know, that was a new hire for us, which is a lot, which correct, is incredibly extensive role and a very difficult and challenging type to hire, but we've been very lucky to find that right person. But ultimately, you're right. If you said to me, Dom, what would be your ideal hire tomorrow? I would love to have an in-house design manager. We'd love to have a finance manager. But, invariably in small business, it's our role, I guess, to work efficiently and ultimately outsource as best we can to those experts in their particular field. We work with tier 1 law firms, financiers, accountants, and designers. Obviously, we respect the craft and we know what we don't know. But I guess our job in the development space is to curate all of those thought leaders and try and bring a project together. But certainly from a business point of view, I guess our pedigree, we say at Podia, is we're kind of a small, private, nimble with sort of institutional governance. Most of the people we've hired typically come from those larger institutional organisations. But that being said, I mean, I have a landscape architectural background. We have
Who would have thought,
right? The gardener.
You wanted to build golf courses.
That's it. I want to build golf courses and ski resorts. 2 of my passions,
actually,
which is unique, right? But now I look at floor plans, and someone might say, that was a waste of 5 years. But I have a keen appreciation for landscape and the value that it brings to a development.
And it's not just exterior.
That's it, right? And equally, we have lawyers, accountants, financiers. We've got a valuer in the business. Everyone and project managers, and so everyone has a different background. But we always see a little gem of brilliance in each of their CVs, which we hold on to. I don't need 10 straight university development managers.
Yeah.
We like a broad spectrum of experience, and I think that adds flavour and skill sets. Spot on. So that's a bit about, I guess, the people and the business we've got.
It's interesting because I think the two key things that stood out just with what you were saying is, someone that you're wanting to bring into the business, for example, it's that the role is that you stay in that lane of the role and you're confident in it. And I've noticed with, hiring, we've had staff come in and out. And one thing I've really noticed is I'm sort of in a lane as the owner and as the creative director, let's call it, interior designer. And I'm the visionary, I guess you would call it. I'm just sort of thinking of words as we speak, but that's where I see myself. So when someone says, hey, can you edit the elevation to have a 20 millimeter, I'm thinking I can.
Yes.
But I would love for someone else to be, and now I have that team. Right. However, at first I'm thinking, how do I wear and how do I do all of that? Because I want to be in my role in confidence with the client and not be thinking about the 4 or 5 hours of technician work or manager work that I've got to do between 6 and 10 p.m. tonight.
It's so interesting you say that, because I'm sort of at this nexus as well in my new role. I'm trying to elevate myself to 30,000 feet rather than being in the weeds. And you're right, similar to yourself, retract 10 years, you were marking up drawings and doing shadow lines on joinery pieces and looking at control joints and
which I love.
Which exactly, and equally, I'm passionate about diving into the detail. But you're right, in your new role as managing director and business owner, you are not only the visionary, you somewhat have to, you're right, pull yourself out of the weeds to grow your business. And
everyone talks about scaling, and I'm thinking,
correct.
Okay, I will.
Correct. Otherwise, you fall in the trap of, you're right, you'll continue to do great work, but you'll be in the minutiae detail when ultimately you need to be finding your next client, growing your business, building and empowering your staff to take that leadership and grow them as well. And that's, I guess, what I've also struggled with.
You do a course in empowering staff.
Well, look,
is that a thing?
I'm certainly no expert. I have struggled with that because
you've got to have energy for that too.
You do. And it's a whole different skill set. They don't teach you that.
I never studied management.
Exactly. So, and then you obviously, and that's what I've found at Mirvac quite challenging, is that you had extremely competent development management and development professionals who continued to deliver successful outcomes on projects. Therefore, they would be rewarded, and then they would be elevated into a new role and promoted, and that would continue to happen. Then fast forward 5-10 years, you have someone who's an extremely good technician, who's extremely competent in their role, sitting now in a managerial position, overseeing 50 other staff members. Invariably, they don't want to be in a managerial position. They just want to
They don't enjoy the skills of that role.
Correct. And they're actually not, they don't have those skills. And I found that that was probably...
That happens so often in businesses.
It does, and that's probably, I guess, my fear, that you're right, you need to pull yourself out of the weeds and help empower your staff, grow them to become better development managers in the particular role that we're in, empower them to make decisions, make mistakes. Nothing we do is life or death.
No.
But pulling myself out of the weeds I found probably more challenging than not.
Because years can fly by. And you think
correct, and you're right. I love marking up floor plans and drawings and looking at elevations and improving the spaces that we create. But that's probably not my best value add right now. We need to be looking at the next opportunity, how to grow the business, how do we restock the pipeline, manage risk, rather than, you're right, negotiating a consultant agreement or tendering a project to a builder, or you're right, marking up kitchen elevations.
I remember when my mentor, do you know Define? Did we talk about Define Consulting? She works with Richard and the team.
Okay. Oh, yes, you did mention that.
Yeah, and or Richard Stanisic's team, I should say. And so that's Elle McCarthy, and she's my mentor. And her and I had a chat, I remember when I first started, and, she kept sort of saying value add, in terms of my role and my skill set. And I'm thinking, this is like foreign to me, because, you kind of study and you get in the industry and you start your own business and then you're a business owner. And it's like, now I have to think about all these other things. What is my role? What is my value add? And things like that. So it's just interesting you mentioned that, because it was something I really had to go, what am I good at? I'm going to go and own that now. And whatever I need to delegate, obviously I need to manage someone in that role, but it's being really strict with what works and what doesn't work. And we've just celebrated 5 years of Unfolded.
Congratulations. Well done.
Thank you, November.
It's a big milestone.
It is. And I think given COVID and everything, it feels like it's been 10, but
I bet.
in a way, but it also feels like it's been 2. It's a weird time, but it's, because everything's flown. But at the same time, it's, I think when you go, 5 years, where should I be or where could I be in my 6th year? What does that look like? I want to be empowered to make it look the way that I want to make it look. Where is the business going? Who do I need to bring on board?
Sure.
And so it's been that pivotal moment for me to go, I want next year to be different. This year was one of my biggest, started a podcast and just busiest, essentially with the team and projects being larger than usual and things like that. And when you sit in your little scaling chair, you're like, okay, I've scaled. Now I need a holiday.
Have you enjoyed the growth period and the burden of risk that comes with that, but also the opportunity? I mean...
Yeah, I would say majority is enjoyment.
Okay.
So 80-20 maybe.
Okay.
But the 20 has been lesson after lesson after learning after learning.
Right.
But when you look back sometimes you're like, that had to happen. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be looking at year 6 now going, things are going to be different in a good way because of the lessons and the learnings. And if I didn't go through them, I'd probably just be like, sailing into year 6, Yep. So anyway, it was just interesting when you mentioned the value add.
No, it is. It is. And look, ultimately, people make up organisations, and we like to go to work every day with like-minded people. We're a design-led firm, and I want to have enjoyment out of what we do every day.
Totally.
I mean, I love going to work every day, solving problems. We invariably, it's what I feel like is all we do these days. But there's a lot of joy out of what we do, and we love collaborating with the industry's best, and that's why I like what we do. We wake up one morning and they're having a discussion with the builder around solving buildability issues, unpacking engineering problems with structural and services engineers, speaking with a financier in the afternoon, having a good conversation with a sales agent and a potential customer, and then collaborating with wonderful design architects, interiors, landscape, and architecture around a table, bashing floor plans together. So I guess our role in what we do is extremely diverse, and we're lucky that we get to do what we do. The industry has its challenges at the moment, but I guess that's why we like doing what we're doing, because we wear so many different hats, and my day's invariably incredibly diverse.
And you seem like you've got a lot of energy.
Look, I definitely do. And look, that also stems from Michael Gracie, our director. I mean, I can't find anyone who's got more enthusiasm, passion in the industry than Mike. And we both share that,
Do you feel that you bounce?
I think we do. We really do. Ultimately, we're extremely aligned, and I think that's helpful. Look, he's mentored me. He's grown me into the development manager and the general manager that I am today, and we've still got a long way to go, but we are very aligned on what's important to us, values and integrity. We're both passionate design thought leaders. I mean, we've both got yellow butter trace paper on our desk. We think that we're failed architects, but often there are developers who just hide behind spreadsheets, and that's not us. But we also respect the craft of the designers we work with, and we love interrogating, pushing, pulling, and questioning every part of the design to make sure the product that we invariably deliver is right, fit for purpose for the customer, because ultimately that's what we do. But yes, our energy and passion for the industry is sort of paramount in our business. I think it's systemic, but equally resilience. I mean, this is not an easy game. And
the ambition and the drive.
That's it.
You have to have it.
You have to be, because if you're not resilient, you're not ambitious, and you're not driven in this game, you won't survive.
No.
Because invariably, you arrive in the office at 7:30 and you leave at 7:30, and there's problems from go to woe day in, day out, and it's our job to stay positive and continue to push forward. We're always pushing because it's just challenging in this environment to make things work. So yes, enthusiasm and passion for design is sort of at the forefront of what we do, and I think that's systemic with all of our staff. We share in that. There's a lot of energy in the office.
And in the collaborative environment, it's kind of fun.
It is. And
I would be similar.
And it's and that's why we like working with like-minded designers and collaborators, because we want to foster an environment where we all enjoy what we're doing, and we want everyone to make a good earner out of what we're all doing. Ultimately, these projects have a financial outcome. That's why we're in business.
Yeah.
But we want to have some fun along the way.
And can I ask you, just hearing you talk about all the different hats and a day in the life of Dominic and things like that, do you ever have, I was chatting with my podcast producer earlier around perfectionism. How do you ever find, because I feel like that's a common thread a lot of people are talking about at the moment, vulnerability, perfectionism, burnout, all the things. And it's like, how do we all cope with that type of thing, particularly in an environment and a role that's so detail driven? Do you find that because you're in such a big group?
It's a really good question. And you're right. In the first sort of 10 years of my career, and Mike could probably agree to this, and Cameron, obviously, in the space that we play in, as you know, inherently we're always pushing. As soon as you find an opportunity and you put a foot on a development site and you invariably pay for the land with cash or debt funding, there's a bank there. Someone's lending you money, whatever the scale of that lend is, the clock starts then. And the clock doesn't stop until you get your last dollar back. So invariably we're in a sort of a high pressure environment.
Is that meaning that when the money's sort of, hey, we're investing in you to do this development, is that where the clock starts? Is that what you mean? Because the investment's been completed?
Correct. Typically, you're right. As soon as, whether it's Podia Capital, so our own equity, or whether it's bank-funded debt that we put into an opportunity, as soon as the money leaves the bank account, the interest bill starts. Like the clock is ticking, as you know. So in this current interest rate environment, the sums get quite significant, right? So invariably, time value of money for us is always at the back of our mind, and we are constantly pushing to get designs drawn as quickly as possible, briefs prepared, DAs lodged, approvals obtained, builders tendered, awarded.
Money.
Correct. Construction, push as fast as you can. We don't have the luxury of a mum and dad single dwelling. Let's let it take 3 or 4 years. We don't mind.
Yeah. We're having a Christmas lunch
spot on
for a week.
Time is the clock starts from day one. So invariably that builds a bit of a pressure cooker environment in the office. And I guess that's where our enthusiasm and passion for driving efficiency in everything we do is stemmed from, because we know that there is a clock that's ticking. So yes, in a high pressure environment like we operate in, I probably have struggled over the last few years in managing those stress levels and time management. I probably had more of a 90-10 focus on work-life balance. Having recently, my wife and I married, my wife given birth to our first child earlier this year, has been a real fundamental shift for me. I've probably struggled adjusting to switching off the work brain, moving more to work-life balance and sort of well-being, being present at home for my wife, not checking emails, not being constantly available to the myriad of consultants or team members who rely on us.
Challenging to do.
So I would say, I've really struggled with that adjustment. I'm working on it. And look, Mike and Cameron are hugely supportive at Podia of giving me the time and the bandwidth to separate myself from work. It's sitting with me. Yeah. It's not them. They've empowered me to manage my time more efficiently and know when to clock off and be available and present for my wife and my child. But I'm only 4 months in, and I feel like I'm struggling every day. So I wouldn't say I have, by any stretch of the imagination, got it down pat. I think this will probably take me another 6 months to sort of move into the new groove. Define my new role as in a managerial, pull myself out of the weeds, and be more available for family outside of the office, because life isn't everything. And I've given my life to my career so far, and there's a huge path, a huge trajectory going forward with Podia and the growth of that business, which I'm hugely excited about. But ultimately, that balance is imperative. Mike's a big believer of mindfulness and well-being and wellness, and a huge advocate to support staff in making sure health and well-being, fitness is a priority. And I think we're all very much aligned.
It's a mental game.
It is, and in this game, you can be burnt out because ultimately we're juggling 9-10 projects at any one time. We've got people, investors, banks, builders pulling you in every different direction. It can become overwhelming, and sometimes you succumb to that, and it's not healthy.
No.
So I think, I would say.
But you're aware, though, your boss is compassionate.
They are. They are very extremely aware, and I think they realise that the pressures of the environment that we're in, But managing that is, that responsibility sits with me. And then also for me to lead my team in showing them that it's okay to leave work, go home and spend time with your family. Work is not everything.
No.
It's important, no doubt, and just sort of prioritize those high value tasks. That low hanging fruit, like marking up drawings or writing consultant briefs, that can wait. That stuff's not high value stuff.
No.
So I guess, look, that's probably more of a personal awareness piece around the adjustment to the pressure cooker environment I work within, and now, my new role as a dad and how I'm available for my family is something I definitely need to work on.
Yeah, but it's so nice, if we look back, I don't even know, 40, 50 years ago, that vulnerability piece of, hey, I'm really going through an adjustment phase at the moment. Life is completely different to what I've ever experienced, bear with me type thing, and having a boss who says, or a manager who says, hey, well-being is important here.
We're here for you.
Yeah, this platform is to support you in this journey. Let's manage your workload, your efficiency.
Yep.
Let's have a chat.
That's it. And ultimately, that person will perform better at work if they have demarcated that home-work-life balance well with the support of, the business, because otherwise, you're right, it leads to burnout, exhaustion, and ultimately that staff member will resign, move on, and that's a business of our size and scale can't quite afford to have good people go.
Yeah.
It has happened, and it leaves it leaves a big hole in your business, especially when you've got the right person, and for whatever, lack of oversight, and we've seen that before. We've pushed staff too hard in some respects and haven't quite listened to or gauged the feedback and observed how they're actually managing the workload, and that's a failing on our part. In hindsight, but it leaves a big hole in the business. So invariably we've learned, all right, we need to be more aware of how our staff are nurtured in and outside of the office to ultimately, selfishly, keep the business moving in the right direction, keep everyone happy.
Yeah, it's so interesting hearing the back end of a development company. Well, you don't often hear about it. You just sort of see these developments going up and you're like, that's beautiful.
It's not exactly. It's not all glitz and glam, and it's not what you see on Instagram or on a website. There's a lot of moving parts. And like I said earlier, sort of, typically on any project, commercial, retail, residential, hospitality, health, sort of from the first day $1 spent to the last day that, the keys are handed over and delivery, it's typically a 4 to 5 year process.
Yeah,
it's a long time between meals. So yes, resilience, and the foresight to just hang in there and continue to pursue good work, but be resilient is, I guess, paramount in what I do. And I guess if there's any young professionals looking to forge a career in development, sort of that loyalty and passion for the craft, be obviously inherently curious, is, I think...
and ask questions.
Correct. Curiosity is the one thing that drives us. I mean, I sit down every day with architects and designers like yourself, or suppliers, stone supplier, fixtures and fittings appliances, joiners, stonemasons, precasters, and I'm genuinely curious about the craft, the product, well before it even gets to site, is conceived on site. And if you're not curious, then I don't think this is the space for a young individual in development, because we're constantly learning in our game.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone...
And having the confidence to ask the questions, because I think we all sort of think, oh, well, that person's an expert. They're going to think that I know. We had a stone supplier, Unrivaled, on the podcast in maybe June, and Jack and Joel. And there was things that I was asking them that I've never had the opportunity to really sit down and say, so how does it work? Like, are you stonemasons? Are you not? Do you get it? Do you just buy it from the shop and cut it? All the sort of what do you even say, mainstream questions that I think everybody has.
Correct.
Because again, you look at Pinterest and you're like, that's beautiful. But how? How did you craft that? And often it's not what you think. They're like, oh, struggle.
It isn't. And look, as I said to you earlier, I mean, and that's, it's a tangible asset. I mean, we sit in the sort of the developer shoes, and there's this probably industry stigma that, big, bad, ugly developer. And invariably, that's just not the truth. Ultimately, we're trying to create great places, and we deliver built form, whether it's, residential, retail, or hospitality or whatnot. And there's a long journey from start to finish. It's not it's not a smooth process, and ultimately people just see big prices at the end of the project and think, oh, greedy developer, and ultimately that's just not the case. There's a long process from start to finish with a lot of collaborators and a lot of stakeholders. So yeah, I guess if anyone's listening out there, we're not all bad.
But it sounds like, even just what you've said with Mike and Cameron, that there's a much more nourished approach to what you do. It's definitely not just, hey, this is the return on investment. This is what we just got to make sure our staff are doing what they need to do. We move on to the next project.
No, correct.
There's so much going on behind the scenes.
It's probably similar to yourself as a founder. We're trying to create a sort of a family type culture and environment at Podia where we can grow everyone and we can have some fun along the way. Exactly. Our projects, we want to deliver great places. It's incredibly important to us. We think we're design led. It's very important that we create spaces that stand the test of time. We ultimately know who our customer is, depending on which sector we're in, and we are custodians of the project on behalf of the customer. I mean, that's what Mirvac taught us at the forefront, was that customer is king. And if we're not doing our job right, I won't have a product that meets the market on completion. So we spend a lot of time understanding who the customer is before we conceive an idea and develop a vision for a project.
And that's that relationship that's long-standing.
Yeah, and it's important to us. We're only a small business. We don't want to grow to 40 or 50. We think, there may be some more headcount to bring on as we grow projects, but we don't want to have 30 projects at any one time. We want to deliver really great outcomes, and these are long projects which need detail and oversight to get them right. Otherwise, you're right, you fall into the trap of growing too fast, too quickly, and you make mistakes along the way, and ultimately the business will suffer because the product won't meet the market, and people will find you out pretty quickly.
Yes.
It's a discerning world out there.
Yeah.
and you're right, it's a small industry.
It seems big because there's so many of us, but I find that nearly every time I meet someone new, they know someone I know. And that's across Central Coast and Sydney. And you're thinking, well, you're right. You've got to really keep those relationships in good stead. And
all of those construction, development, design, supplier, banks, it's system, it's far-reaching.
And so on the design side of things, we've dabbled in Mirvac's more sort of commercial approach. Now you're with Podia, and you've mentioned that you've got a few projects that we'll run through. They're much more personal than what you were previously doing. So run me through the approach that you've adopted with Podia and the difference. And you were mentioning, working with architects and designers. And
so I'll probably I'll start with, I guess, our acquisition origination focus to date has probably been opportunistic insofar as we're not sector agnostic. We're not wholly focused on residential. And we're also not just New South Wales based. We've got projects in the Northern Territory and Darwin, in Victoria, Melbourne, Adelaide. We haven't ventured to Perth yet, but we've got projects obviously all through Sydney and New South Wales, in the Northern Rivers in Byron Bay. So we're sort of, and equally, we're not singular sector focused. We're not just residential. We play in commercial, residential, hotel, hospitality, retail, and health. So I guess, the opportunistic focus for us, and it's probably stemmed from time that Mike and Cam had with Lang Walker. If the right opportunity in the right market presents itself, we'll go after it. Obviously, there's a financial hurdle that we always try and solve for, and that's well-trodden path and known. All of our projects are typically joint ventures with a capital partner. So there's Podia is the developer, and we have a silent capital partner who is an incredible supporter of Podia, but they help fund projects. So inherently in whatever we do, we're collaborators, because we often joint venture in all of our projects, and we've done the last sort of 5 or 6 with Centennial Property Group. And so
a lot of collaboration, isn't there?
Well, and there's a lot of,
in a good way,
there's a lot of trust and track record in a partnership like that, because inherently development is risky. And it took a lot of hard work to demonstrate to the capital partners that we were a good horse to back. And ultimately,
invest in us.
Correct. Invest in us and our growth and our story. And we also have to then deliver on that. It's enough not enough just to promise it up front. We have to deliver those returns and the outcomes. And, they're leveraging our experience and track record, but equally, we're then custodians of their brand and their legacy, and we need to deliver for them. So from a design point of view, I guess I'll just focus probably more on the residential projects. We've sort of spent the last 5 years trying to unlock, opportunities where we can add value. We go after the tricky, complicated sites because we see there's more of an opportunity there rather than buying something on market available to other developers that we know in the industry, and we're competing. So we like the tricky, awkward, complicated, challenging sites.
Healthy challenge.
That's it, right? And like I said, we've got resilience and we've got energy to go after these things. We've probably in the last 5 years, specialised in 6 or 7 strata amalgamations, insofar as where we've seen opportunities in the lower North Shore, eastern suburbs, or further reaching where there's not just one large englobo site. We've managed to literally door knock individual mum and dad owners in apartment blocks where we see value on a site that's got beautiful views, great frontage, the ability for us to work a really tight and efficient floor plan and deliver a great product. It has all the surrounding amenity and location attributes that the customer would like in the residential space. So the sort of last 2 or 3 projects in Neutral Bay 1, Neutral Bay 2 and North Sydney have sort of stemmed out of that opportunistic buying where we think we can put a foot on a site well, we can get it on good terms. We know what the end value will be. We know what the customer wants. We know what the product needs to be. And we've got a planning pathway to get an approval on a site like that. So
much to consider.
There is a bit to consider, but thankfully we often unpack these development sites with really skilled professional designers. And it starts with the architect. And we love working with a broad range of...
Can I ask, do you pick the site prior to engaging with any architects?
We do. Typically, we do. Yes.
Because that's your lane again.
That's it.
Yes.
So yes, acquisition and origination of a site and putting a foot on a site sits with us. Once we've actually progressed to almost exchanging a contract on land or whatever the existing asset is, that's when we will then bring on an architect, someone often that we trust, know and like. And
worked with before.
Correct. We know, and we believe in and trust their work and their process to help us unpack what is the highest and best use on this site. Typically in the residential space, we know it's going to be residential units, but
accommodate the view and
correct, exactly. And we start from a full site analysis. We're very site-led. What is the topography surrounding buildings, environment, roads, infrastructure? Are we selling views? Are we not selling views? Who is our market? Are these 1, 2, 3 bed conventional product, or are we focused more on downsizer market, larger 3 and 4 beds? And we sort of interrogate, push, pull, all of those considerations right up front. And then ultimately we're trying to solve for a building envelope that makes financial sense for us and back solving a land value. Because
it's so much to invest. You want to get it right.
You have to get it right. And look, we've made mistakes before where
expensive mistakes.
Well, expensive mistakes because ultimately we're in the game of selling floor space. Area is everything to us. And often, yes, developers squeeze the lemon as best we can to try and fit.
Is that a stigma?
It is fair, and it probably is a stigma that sits with developers because invariably the cost of land in this country, certainly in Sydney, is exponential. And to make a feasibility work, to back solve for the return hurdles that you're chasing from a return on cost and invested IRR point of view, we invariably have to squeeze every square metre out of the land. And that's not to say that we try and squeeze as many widgets into the site as possible. And I'll give you our latest project, Wirra at Neutral Bay, as an example. It's a 1,800 square metre site, smack bang in the middle of Neutral Bay, on the sloping hills, gun barrel views of the Harbour Bridge, North Sydney, the Opera House, and out to sort of the eastern suburbs. We could theoretically fit probably 42 units on that site, a conventional mix of 1s, 2s and 3s, up the spectrum of 50 square metres, 70, 90, 130 for 1s, 2s and 3s. But invariably we know, having done a project in that same location 2 years prior, that the market for that type of location is typically a downsizer, 50 to 55 plus, and they want size. They're coming from a beautiful big home on the lower North Shore, Mosman, Cremorne, Neutral Bay,
Amazing.
And they want space. In this particular instance, we had no 2 bedrooms. We delivered 20 apartments. Our smallest unit, being a 3-bed, is 150 square metres, and our largest unit's 210. We interrogated the floor planning and the space considerations ad nauseum with MH&DU, who are the architects appointed on the job, and collaborating with our favourite interior architects, Richard Stanisic, Jonathan and Kirsten, and Georgia. It's our 4th project with them. And basically, that was very much a product and market-led outcome. Yes, we could theoretically squeeze another 20 units on the site, but was that going to drive the highest and best use? Was that what the market needed? Probably not. And the learnings from the previous project we finished 2 years earlier, where I had 36 units, which invariably, that's what we had approved. Fast forward 24 months to completion, 5 of our customers, our buyers, amalgamated 2 and 3 bedroom units into larger 200 square metre units. And so
that tells you
that was some real customer feedback that, guys, we love the building, but I think the product, the size and the mix wasn't quite right. And so thankfully, we had the ability to pivot. We had structure and services basically being, delivered on site as and when we were making these changes, which was, somewhat like doing open heart surgery, but in a tough market.
Just honk a horn, everyone just stop.
Everyone just pause, but as you know, you can't stop. I've got guys pouring concrete and laying, formwork and steel, and I've got a potential customer who's saying to me, Dominic, we love the project, the location, the views, the aspect, but the product I'm looking at right now is too small for my needs. Could you consider a larger apartment that brings together a 2 and a 3? Can you help me bring that to life? The easy answer would be to say no, but in a tough market, you've got to say yes to everyone and then work out how to solve it.
Say yes
on the run.
Work it out later.
So we said yes, and we work it out later.
Everyone tells me to do that, and every time I do it, I'm thinking, in hindsight, I'm glad. Or at the time, I was like,
And look, it's an incredibly painful process, but ultimately, when you've got a customer in front of you, giving you real live feedback, and you've got the ability to pivot, you have to pivot.
Yeah.
And in that particular instance, we did that on 5 different occasions. So we thought, right, and we delivered those homes for these people, and they put their footprint on it. And ultimately, the customer, we're delivering homes for people.
Well, you're suiting the demographic of demand.
That's it. And we don't always get it right.
It's not always personal. It's like,
and we don't always get it right as developers. We put, in this particular instance on this project, we put forward floor plans which we thought would meet the market as best we knew at the time.
That's it, to the best of your ability in that instance.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we won't always get it right. And invariably the customer...
But you're open to feedback, and that's something
correct.
that you're willing to...
Spot on.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what we'd like to say from Podia's perspective. We are, we're customer focused. So if a customer, and I had this only recently at our Wira display suite, walked into the apartment, they were looking at a beautiful penthouse unit, 200 square metres on level 4. They said, look, Dominic, love the scheme that Richard and Stanisic have conceived from an interiors point of view. However, for whatever reason, these travertine bench tops, they despised. Now, rightly or wrongly...
It's trending at the moment, I'm surprised.
Correct. Now I bit my tongue, and rightly or wrongly, ultimately, the customer is key. And whether the customer likes a Trav benchtop or not is not really up for me to say. If I have the ability to tweak the product to suit their requirements, then we're not so precious and so steadfast that we will turn a customer away. In that particular instance, I welcome the feedback. I offer up a meeting with Jonathan or Georgia from Richard Stanisic, and we facilitated an interior design meeting where we interrogated some of the finishes to suit the buyer's needs, because thankfully...
This is all prior to the build.
This is all prior to build. Well, sorry, we're in construction at the moment. We're delivering, we're at sort of bulk excavation. So I haven't yet delivered finishes. So I've probably got 6 months to make this decision until there's a no or no-go point.
6 months.
So I have bandwidth, but invariably other developers may say no.
Yes.
Too bad. But that's sort of not our approach. Ultimately, this is...
And you've got such a close relationship with Jonathan. And
we do, and thankfully they're also very accommodating. And yes, there are fees and rework and everything else that goes with it, so be it. But ultimately, we're trying to cater a product towards the customer. And if the customer doesn't love what we've delivered, we'll take that feedback on and we'll do our best within the circumstances available to us and the time of the project to try and accommodate their needs. And I think that's often how... or why we've had some good success on some of these projects, because we don't drop a nail in the sand and say, guys, sorry, no. we won't be accommodating. Look, it's a painful process to make changes, as you know.
Oh, yes.
Redocumentation, recoordination, it's costly and timely, but
even just things like sourcing the physical sample just to make sure that what it looks like online is exactly what it
but
looks
also
like.
testing longevity. I mean, we've chosen these finishes already.
Slip ratings.
Correct. Slip ratings and longevity and stains, and making sure that the product is fit for purpose. And then someone walks in and says, I don't like that, I want this because I've had that in my home for the last 30 years.
Natural marble kitchen.
Correct. We need to product and stress test that to make sure, because ultimately our builder and their suppliers warranting that, and ultimately then the buck stops with us.
Yeah.
In 4 or 5 years, if that stone doesn't perform,
Yes.
who do you think the purchaser's calling?
Warranties.
They're not calling Jonathan or the builder. They're calling us, saying, Podia, you didn't deliver me something that was fit for purpose. I've got now a stain on my bench top. Come back and fix it.
Yeah.
And as I said to you earlier, we don't want to be coming back and fixing things. So we have a rigorous design process where we really interrogate the selection of finishes. This is not like designing a beautiful high-end home for a very specific customer. We're a commercial developer and we're delivering homes on scale, and we have to be at a scale.
And to a versatile demographic.
Spot on.
So it's the practical, the functional, and the aesthetic.
That's
It's a lot to consider.
That's it.
It's interesting you mentioned about the longevity of products. We're working on a project that we've only just released the renders for. We use Pear Studio.
Love it.
First.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, and released a couple on Instagram recently, and they'll start to, send it out to the agents and see the demand and things like that. And because I specified, I may have mentioned this on an episode before, but I just find it fascinating. You specify something 2 years prior, and then it finally gets to, let's install it.
Yes.
And the builder's like, 1, 2, 3, 6 different things are discontinued. Let's reselect. So for me, because it's a class 2 dwelling, you have to go back in and go, all right, what are all my specs?
Spot on.
It has to be, these exterior pavers have to be a certain thickness because of the way that we've built it, the way that it looks in the render now. There's so many things to consider. And
these
it's
are
not just a quick great.
You're 100% right.
Yeah.
And look, these are the constraints, certainly in the current multi-residential space that we play in, that sort of govern the push and pull for us and managing risk, because ultimately, you're right, we conceive a floor plan that ultimately we put in front of a customer, and what accompanies that is often a brochure, a display suite, a 3D render, a model, and some beautiful CGIs, and a finishing schedule. And all of that collateral is made available to the purchaser at the time of buying. So effectively, all of the commitments that we've made in that documentation is effectively binding. So what I've shown and represented in the render, the model, the display suite has to all be consistent and correct, and ultimately and accurate, and has to be delivered on completion. Because if Mr. and Mrs. Smith walk through their beautiful brand new apartment in 2 years and the stone isn't exactly how it looked in that render, I've got big problems.
Yes.
And it happens. And
that's why CGI, as we were discussing earlier, are so
and
important.
And gone are the days that you're right, it was, artist disclaimer or, artist impression.
Yeah.
Those days are gone.
This is 70% close to accuracy.
Exactly.
No.
These discerning, savvy, sophisticated buyers are actually including the renders as part of a legal contract for sale. They're taking photos of the display suite. They're taking the brochure home and sticking on their fridge. They know these floor plans better than the team do. They have looked at these things for 24 months. And so when they walk in on completion and we hand them the keys, the level of scrutiny that they bring to their inspection is incredible.
Yeah.
And so that's why the risk that sits with us, the design team, the builder, to get it right is paramount. We can't afford to have to make a mistake.
No.
Because ultimately that purchaser then won't settle with us and we've delivered a poor outcome for them. So
it's a lot of time.
Back to your point, the design team. I guess that's why when we look at these new projects, yes, once we've secured a site, we bring on a trusted architect. We will often choose an architect based on the site. We don't have a preconceived, we think this would be a great project for this particular architect or that interiors. We ultimately unpack the site and the deal and then fit for purpose based on workflow and opportunities within the site. Is this suitable to that particular architect and that interiors? Will they collaborate together? Will they not? Often architects sometimes have a preconceived view of who they'd like to work with as well.
Yes.
So we all have to be on the same page. Correct. And obviously, in the design space, as you know very well, there are a lot of big personalities, and some of these people have forged, brilliant careers, and they've become very well regarded for their work they do in the craft, and they're quite set in their ways. And so I guess it's our job as the client, but also the developer and the facilitator of the design process to make sure that party A gets on with party B, and poor little developer in the middle actually has some involvement in ultimately delivering the product. So navigating personalities and design behaviors has always been interesting for us, but invariably we like working with design teams that we've got trust and rapport with, and we know that can deliver. Because when the clock's moving,
that relationship.
You do, and it goes both ways. We very much respect their craft.
Trust.
We write a development brief, we give it to them, and we take feedback. We don't ram it down their throat. We say, guys, how can we improve this?
Micromanage it all.
Spot on. We know what we don't know, and we encourage thought leadership. Guys, how do we ideate, evolve, innovate, drive efficiency? How do we make this building faster, smarter, more functional? How do we maximize the space? Interiors. How are you looking and thinking about the space? Because that's a whole other framework, as you know.
Oh, it's huge.
And that's often why we
way more.
We respect the demarcation between architect and interiors.
Yes.
There's huge value in both.
Everyone sort of thinks it's all just like designer.
Correct.
And it's like, no.
Well, why can't the architect do it all?
Yeah, literally.
And what we've found often in these high-end projects is, yes, you need the interior architect thinks about space so differently to the architect.
Yeah.
And often the architect's so overwhelmed with, all the other site constraints, civil, structural, service coordination, facade.
Because they're a project manager in themselves. We're all about any project manager.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so to bring in the support of a really strong design-led interior firm to help furnish and style and conceptualize the interiors, where ultimately the customer lives.
More detail.
It's so important to us. And look, buildings are designed from the inside out.
Kitchen functionality. Like the architect's sort of like, I've drawn up the surroundings, and I've done a bit of a cookie cutter floor plan here, and I'm thinking those drawers could be different.
Correct.
Finger pull, like all the little details.
Exactly. So it's the minutiae detail, and that's why I said, these buildings are designed from the inside out.
Yeah.
Often architects get so overwhelmed and excited with how the building will look externally, how it will sit in the landscape, how it will be photographed.
Yes.
And I love all of that, but equally, these buildings are lived in by the customer. Yes, you appreciate the facade and the look and feel of the exterior of a building and how it sits in the landscape and its environment, which is equally important, but ultimately people occupy buildings from the inside. And so I can't tell you how many times, as you would know, that an architect serves up a floor plan and the an architectural team go away and unpack it and completely reinvent the floor plan.
Yes.
Create more space here, more efficiencies here, tighten bench tops, joinery, kitchens, bathrooms. All those critical dimensions which make
curving walls,
which make the space livable, and are often probably overlooked from the architect because he's got so many other things to focus on. So that's why often we find, demarcating the scope and splitting them often gives
it's refreshing to hear this.
Gives a lot of space and breadth to the delivery of the right product.
Yeah.
And invariably the project can then stand on its own and says, look, we've got huge support from an architect from an exterior and functional point of view, but equally the interiors have been conceived by XYZ, and this is how we've thought about the narrative and delivering
100%.
The finishes, fixtures, the tactility, the materials. That's the tangible stuff.
Yes.
So we see we see a huge amount of value, spot on, with collaborating architect with interiors, because ultimately we think that drives better outcomes for our projects.
Yeah. We recently had a architect in Northern Beaches reach out, and he said, "Oh, look, to be honest with you, at the moment I've got 4 or 5 jobs over the next 2 years, and essentially I just want to stay in my own lane, and I want to be able to give an interior designer free rein, as per my conceptual direction." That's aligned with what I like as well, and I kind of love that, because already I was aligned with this particular architect in the sense of appreciating that the exterior needs to align with the interior. Mm-hmm. And, he's obviously chatting with maybe a few different people who he deems that have the same vision as him. And like you say, style and brand and things like that. And when I saw what he's put together to date, I thought, beautiful, that's so me. It's just so unfolded.
And he probably also knows, who the client and the customer is in that particular instance, and knows that your work will fit that brief. And that's why, similar situation in the Lower North Shore, we typically have a quite, a conservative buyer, a conservative customer.
Yeah.
And so, yes, there are some brilliant interior architects out there doing really progressive work, But in our view, for that particular project, their work is not suitable to our customer. Whereas we know Richard Stanisic have delivered time and time again for the perfect, for our customer typology, and they just understand the tactility of what they want and what they're used to. And these people are coming from, larger homes. They're used to having furnished and styling pieces that they've, accumulated over years and years. And so I guess, the interior architect's job is to sort of curate a space that can accommodate all of those things when these people move in. And
so specific.
It is, and that's the craft, and that's, I guess, that's their genius, and that's their value add in our view.
Yeah.
Because we find often that the architect doesn't have that skill set or that layer of thinking.
Yes.
It's quite granular.
Oh. And even looking at, we'll touch on Bonobo up at Byron. Am I saying it right?
Right.
Bonobo?
Yes.
What's I wanted to ask the name.
Okay.
Firstly, where did that come from? And then we'll dive into the design.
Yeah. So look, the name of this project actually had two lives. Initially, it was called the Barbertine, and that was a name that we branded the project with pre-Raise being involved. And the Barbertine is basically a method of the building is inherently brick and concrete, so natural materials. And the Barbertine method is a sort of a clay and sculpting practice method of way of creating the Barbertine. Okay. Yeah, so Barbertine method is the way is a method of craft within the sort of, how do I say it, ceramics space. So we felt that was fitting for the project, given it was forged from clay, brick and water. March forward sort of 6 months into the project's inception, where we launched the project to market. That's when the Catalano family, who own Raise on Watergoes, the project came across their desk. They wanted to be involved. Ultimately, arguably, in our opinion, one of the greatest, most respected hospitality venues in the country. The service and delivery of what they do over at Watergoes is brilliant. They wanted to be part of the project.
Found a niche too, didn't they?
Correct. And there's obviously huge brand alignment with the Raise service offering and a hotel hospitality project that we were delivering, that we thought there's a great partnership here. So ultimately, as part of Raise coming on board, the opportunity to rebrand the project, the Bonobo by Raise, was under their sort of leadership and their direction. The Bonobo is actually a monkey. And insofar as the name, the Bonobo, sort of, I guess, gives cue to the type of personality, the place that we're creating will evolve into. I think this is a mixed-use precinct. It's a hotel hospitality venue. We're delivering 41 hotel apartments up in Byron Bay. It's a Richards and Spence design building. They're well known, obviously, for their wonderfully acclaimed award-winning project, the Carlisle Hotel up in Brisbane, which the
very
saying.
Instagrammable.
It is. And so, look, the selection of Adrian and Ingrid to be part of this project for us was very much, obviously, on the back of a study tour that Mike Grassi and I did up the north coast from sort of northern New South Wales up to through the Gold Coast and through Brizzy. And then we looked at probably 5 or 6 of the beautiful projects, the James Street Precinct, Tugun Cornerstone Stores, Fish Lane, everything that we were looking for in architecture and place creation. Richards and Spence, we felt, had absolutely nailed. And Ingrid took us meticulously through the thought process of how she conceived these buildings. They have a very unique and iconic architectural style, as you can appreciate. And we felt for our particular site in Byron Bay, it was the place was crying out for something spectacular and unique. It's certainly not conventional.
But that works up there.
And there's a tapestry of eclectic architecture up there, from existing weatherboard type coastal look and feel aesthetic buildings to more contemporary
energy.
Spot on.
Yeah.
And I guess, look, either love it or hate it, this building will be very iconic.
It will be built.
It will be built. It's in construction at the moment. And look, in that particular instance, that project, in some respects, we consider bringing on an interior architect to complement Richards and Spence, but they were very confident in the I guess the management of design, interior from an interior to exterior, standpoint, and they were both very complementary of each other. There's obviously a lot of rectilinear and geometric form on this building, a lot of off-form concrete and brickwork, raw and natural materials.
Which is unique
Which is unique to the area. Obviously, climatically, it's obviously a really warm environment in Byron. And so,
concrete keeps it cool.
Correct. So, the selection of materials and cross-ventilation, solar access, and how the spaces were conceived paid homage to, yes, the environment we're operating in. And so that in that particular instance on that project, we didn't supplement Richards and Spence with a third-party interior architect. They took carriage of the design, both externally and in interior-wise. And, yeah, it's a mixed-use project. So hotel apartments, there's 41 apartments available. We're well and truly through the bulk of the sales at the moment. We're on track for completion end of next year. We've got a beautiful rooftop pool, rooftop gardens. We've got a beautiful central courtyard and about 750 square metres of retail on the ground floor, where Rays will be curating a beautiful 5-star hotel experience.
Amazing.
Lobby bar, wellness, food and beverage. There's a beautiful 160-person or cover, F&B restaurant. So it's going to be a really sexy, exciting precinct, which will be accessible to everyone. It's not just customer-facing. The ground plane is fully accessible to the public. So we'll be encouraging locals and tourists alike to come and enjoy the F&B offering that Rays are curating and the service and hospitality offering that we're providing. So I think that'll be a really interesting project for us, and hopefully it'll put, Byron's already on the map, but this will be very much Rays' big foray into a different product type. It's not like the Rays on Watergo's offering, which is obviously extremely high end and only available to a select few who've got the budget for a beautiful Rays stay. But this is probably more accessible, more affordable to a broader range of people.
And in the centre.
It is. It's right in the centre of Byron Bay. It's about 650 metres back from the beach on Johnson Street.
Not a bad spot.
Not a bad spot. We were blessed, obviously. Justin Hems and Maryvale Group bought Cheeky Monkeys, the site across the road from us.
What haven't they bought?
Very shortly after. So as you know, everything that Justin touches turns to gold. So we were obviously doing backflips when Maryvale bought that venue, and they're working, we understand, with some very well-regarded interior designers and architects to sort of bring that Cheeky Monkeys, 2.0 site to life. It'll be a beautiful F&B and restaurant offering. It did, crying out for it. And look, that's now on the doorstep of our new project. So, fast forward 12 months from where we are today, hopefully, we'll invite you up there and you can interrogate all the fixtures and finishes. Exactly. I think there'll be a very, very big party on opening day, and hopefully we deliver, the design outcomes that we all can see from day one. But that's been a long journey, that process. But again, working with a Brisbane-based architect, not Sydney-based.
Something different.
Something different.
Go and view their projects and be in another state.
That's it. And they have a very distinct and iconic architectural style. And they pushed us as the developer and through the briefing process, and we took a lot of their feedback. Ultimately, they said to us, look, you chose us for a reason, so give us the design bandwidth and space
this is this
to step out of our lane. And often we do overstep, and we're all guilty of that.
Yeah.
As the client, we always try and infuse our fingerprint onto some of these projects. But a lesson for us is often, less is more. Take a step back. We've engaged these professionals who are experts in their craft for a reason. Don't overstep and let them do what they need to do.
And the more mature we get in our roles and in our businesses, I'm finding, I find it so refreshing when I'll chat with certain contractors for any job that will say, hey, happy to help. I've actually never done that before. I can give it a go, but really this is what I'm an expert in, or this is what I'm super confident in. But I do know John Smith down the road who can help you confidently. I'm like, thank you.
Really?
Thank you for your transparency. And I'm even trying to adopt more of that, because sometimes I'm a bit of I'll work it out later, like we said. But getting to the point now where I'm like, maybe I don't want to put that pressure on myself. Maybe I will just say Amanda down the street is also
no, you're right.
For
the self-awareness.
That's it. But I can help you confidently in these key areas.
Exactly. And I feel you certainly as developers and sort of custodians of getting a project moving forward, we sometimes can't help ourselves
100%.
overstep.
Well, the passion overrides.
Correct, you're right. And obviously we're passionate, enthusiastic individuals, and obviously, it's been our baby from day one, and we've got this vision of what we think we should be delivering. But ultimately, we can't do it all, and we've collaborated with these experts in the design world for a reason. We have to give them the bandwidth and space to do good work.
Yes. And creativity.
Correct. Otherwise,
everyone feels micromanaged. Creativity goes down the drain.
That's it. And we certainly don't want to, you're right, burden the creative process. And sometimes we can't, because ultimately we're trying to solve for a financial outcome, and we get back to the
and different services.
Correct.
You know, like for me as a designer, my driver would be different to what your driver is versus the builder versus. So it's sort of going, okay, that person, I'm just going to give them, you know, all my faith.
And
they are driven in that lane, you know, in that service.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And often in our role, I mean, our job is obviously to keep projects moving forward, but on time, from a time perspective and on cost, right? And so often, yes, we also fall into the trap of sitting down with architects and designers that we love, and they serve up a beautiful conceptual package, which obviously we fall in love with immediately, and then sadly have to go through the process of handing that over to the cost planner and the builder to put a number to it, and then we fall off our chair and we come full circle and we sit down with the designer and say, look, we love it.
It's better to start there.
We love it, but sadly our budget for this project sits here. How do we actually come full circle, still deliver a beautiful design and outcome, but meet the budget constraints to make this thing viable? Because ultimately, you know, we're solving for a commercial outcome. And often, and I think I said that to you before, I mean, there are some brilliant interior and architectural designers in Sydney and in the space that we play in. What I find in my experience, or our experience, is those that are really the cut above the rest are those that can design beautiful work, but to the budget that the project has. And it's when you work within those constraints and those parameters is where I think the magic happens. Often people can, I mean, in that space, you can design beautiful product when you don't pay any respect to budget.
Yes.
But when you put a budget around something, that's where I think the magic happens. If you can still deliver brilliant outcomes for a price, that's where we see value add. And that's why often we've done so many projects with the same design team, because they understand our constraints.
100%. And that's where most of the time is spent, if I'm honest, because the concept, we always find it's a similar thing. The clients are like, I love it. Where do we go next?
Yes.
And then we start to cost it up with the builder and things like that. And all of a sudden we're like, okay, so we wanted full-scale marble. Maybe we're going to look for some porcelain in some areas.
and look, and that's why it is iterative, you know, like you're never going to get it right the first time, and it's an iterative process where it'll evolve, it'll ideate, you get feedback, and we continue to
revise.
Correct, and work through that. And that's the design process. But it's sort of, in our world, you're right, it has to sort of sit in hand in parallel with costing. As boring and as sad as that sounds, ultimately
it's a reality.
It's the reality, spot on, you know, and we often will question some of the design moves from a material selection point of view. Guys, okay, we've got beautiful Italian travertine from X to Y, or marble, or we're looking at limestone or granite, but on $1 per square metre on a project of this size and scale, I'm not quite sure the project has the bandwidth to absorb that. Could we consider alternatives like a porcelain or blah, blah, blah?
Yeah,
and exactly. And we're not trying to rip the arse out of the budget. We're just trying to solve, or guys, happy for you to spend the money on the flooring and the bench tops. But potentially, correct, potentially we need to unwind some of the timber veneer and look at a laminate on the joinery, or let's just identify a hierarchy of where we want to spend the money. We will spend it, but we've got to be smart about how we spend it.
Yes.
Guys, maybe we should unwind some of the facade fenestrations and whatnot, because there's not a whole lot of value add there. I'd rather spend, another $25 a square metre on carpet and get the beautiful 100% wool carpet, or let's look at vanities and shaving cap, all that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So I guess, our job is not
joinery versus off the shelf.
Our job is not to cut your legs out from under you. It's really, guys, these are the constraints we've got.
Yeah, help us resolve.
Help us, exactly, solve the issue. There's a finite budget. Let's just prioritise where we spend the money and where we're going to have the most impact.
Yeah.
So we're doing that daily. We do that daily. And I feel always terrible because I'd love to say yes to everything, but invariably, in this current climate with cost escalation going through the roof, supply chains on the back of COVID still suffering, everyone's looking for alternatives.
Yeah.
And sometimes often the alternatives are actually superior from a longevity product point of view.
Yeah, like an engineered stone, let's be honest, it works better in a kitchen. Spot on. You don't have to wipe it clean as soon as your partner or your kids have just put a tiny bit of coffee.
And it's so interesting you say that, because I think, look, 5 years ago, and certainly in the high-end residential space, there was this perception that everything had to be natural, real and raw. And it's been an education process from the development team and our sales agents when we meet with customers and they ask us, is this stone real? I said, well, talk me through what do you mean real?
Yeah, what's your interpretation of real?
Correct. And do you know that from an operational point of view, longevity, warranty, risk, the engineered stones in this category X, Y to Z are far superior than the alternative,
and
which is
more affordable.
Natural, more affordable and longevity, long term, blah, 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 blah. The list goes on. And often what we find is, once you take them through that process of educating them on the shift.
It's having the conversation.
Correct.
Every time.
Invariably, you've won them over and they say, you're right, why have I ever considered natural stone or marble? And yes, it's got its place.
They don't know what they don't know.
Correct. So I guess our job, you're right, in that process has been educating them on why we've selected particular finishes. We're not always going to get them right, but there's a reason why we've banned some finishes and not chosen others.
Yes. And then you learn, right?
Correct.
Next time, Harry, I know you love this one, but I'll tell you,
and you're right. And Camilla, we've done jobs, 25 units in Neutral Bay, where we had beautiful natural limestone floors and bench tops and a beautiful quartzite marble. And I've still got purchasers calling me personally on a Saturday night. Dominic, had a dinner party. Someone's left a bottle of wine. It's leaked onto the bench top. My bench top's ruined. Come back and replace it. The product's defective. You haven't sealed the stone properly.
Yeah.
Bring your stonemason out. I then speak with, our wonderful stone supplier, Surface Gallery, Adrian.
Yeah.
This is Dom. We've done XYZ sealing. Here are all the warranties. Here's the installs certificate. We've done everything by the book. It's a natural product. It will patina. It will change colour over time. This is what these people have bought.
This is what you're buying.
So, yes, those learnings evolve for us on every project.
Yeah.
And we hopefully we've got a sort of a bit of a black book of finishes that work and don't work, and we try and, with every project we move forward with,
That's smart.
try and absolve ourselves from putting problem materials and finishes in jobs that will be invariably on the hook for day completion.
It's just not worth it. It can look nice and pretty and you can tick it all off at the start, but you are setting yourself up for those conversations later.
Yep.
Unless you've sort of
spot on
pre-framed it with the client or the potential.
And ultimately, we're the ones coming back to fix stuff. And
that's it.
I don't want to be doing open heart surgery and someone
was in Bali.
Correct. They're finished. They're off the job. All the subcontractors have gone and left. No one wants to know about you, and you're the only number the customer
Your number's
has,
on the brochure.
and they call you, and you think, right. So that's why it's so important. It's imperative for us that we get that stuff right up front, and we really interrogate that with the designers.
Yeah, so important, and that's the relationship.
It is. I think it's healthy, but it's fit for purpose.
Totally. So I'm going to wrap up with a final question. And my question to you is, what is the funniest thing that has ever happened to you on a Zoom call?
Oh, gosh, that's a good question. Obviously, I wind back to COVID and the world in which we lived in, which was all online, all digital, not front-facing. I was at an offsite the night before Christmas party.
Oh.
And obviously, end of the year, far too excited, far too much to drink. 9 a.m. Zoom call with the team, solicitors, architects, trying to unpack a problem, cameras on, and had an overwhelming desire to be sick.
Oh, no.
Didn't have enough time to escape or turn the camera off, and basically proceeded to do my business in and around the table at which I was working on, in front of whoever else was on the call. So I guess that's probably the most embarrassing.
Were they all at the party?
No, unfortunately. It would have made less sense if they were there. They couldn't quite understand what was going on. So that's
Tell me back.
That was a little forthcoming and revealing and highly embarrassing. But I sort of had to show my cards on screen. And look, it revealed a bit of it was honesty in front of a room full of third parties who didn't quite know me that well, obviously, reminding them all that it's okay to have a bit of fun every so often.
Yeah.
So,
or just food poisoning.
Well, that's it. I was probably too honest and told them, yes, I had 1,000 schooners the night before.
She's celebrating.
That's, sort of a bit of a, look, we're not all serious doom and gloom in the property world. We obviously love to have a lot of fun and a bit of fun every so often. So that was probably my most recent embarrassing moment on Zoom.
That's funny. It's a good one.
How about yourself? Have you got one?
Oh, Zoom. I mean, look, to be honest, I'm not on Zoom a whole lot.
Yeah, okay.
I'm either on face to face, in person, or on a phone call, or I don't do a lot of Zoom.
That's good. And I only ask that because I think going back to the whole design process, COVID was an incredible thing insofar as getting people online and facilitating meetings efficiently without having to. I mean, prior to COVID, I'd be in the car daily, driving to the architect's office on numerous different projects, sitting around the table and bashing floor plans and tying up, with working with engineers and architects and the consultant team. And I love that, although highly inefficient, driving around to 3 different offices every day. Yeah. And now you can have, as you know, a Zoom call back to back to back. And really move through these things and keep your day free to do other tasks. But what I miss, though, about doing face-to-face is that collaboration around sitting around a table, pouring through floor plans with the butter paper and working it out on the spot.
And clients love it.
Exactly.
Really, and I can take my tiles.
Correct. I want to sit there and look at it with you, Camilla, and draw and say, well, I'm not sure we've got that right. What do you think? And then you say, all right, Dom, let's try this. And we test it and we iterate. But it all happens on the spot and we say, great, tick that off, march forward, let's move. And we can make decisions quickly.
Yes.
Not this, okay.
It's a different efficiency.
It is. And I find, marking up drawings online and on Zoom, yes, it's efficient, but I find everyone's afraid to speak up. No one actually says what they're thinking.
Yeah, or their microphone's off.
Correct. And then that's, everyone says, okay, well, we'll go away and think about that, work it out offline. And as the client, we just want to progress things quickly. Guys, let's draw it now.
And there goes an hour.
And I want to look at the structure and say, does that work structurally? Yes, it does. Services engineer, can you get that to work? No, it doesn't. Camilla, can you please just redraw this? How does that look in elevation? And we can just spitball it over a group of sketches and we're done.
Yeah.
But I find that doesn't happen anymore.
No, it's so different.
It's gone.
Yeah.
People aren't holding the pen anymore, and I miss that.
Well, I still am. But...
Well, and I think that's a wonderful trait, and don't ever get rid of it.
No.
I think it's hugely valuable, and clients love it. Is my 2 cents around the whole online space.
So good. Well, it's been so good having you on.
Thank you so much for having me. And look, to yourself and the business and the podcast, congratulations. I think it's hugely challenging in this environment to sort of be heard, and in the social media world, I think what you're doing is wonderful. You're giving a voice to designers, developers, suppliers. I think it's a really wonderful thing you're doing. So I commend you and congratulate you and wish you all the success and the best.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing your perspective on, development. And
not a problem.
It's a really unique experience. It's cool.
Well, thank you for having me.
Cool. Thanks, Dom.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Behind the Design. We've created this podcast to bring people together, inspire new ideas, and foster a deeper understanding of what goes on behind the design. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with someone who might find it valuable. Until next time, keep creating and stay inspired.